violin, and Beethoven's Opus 18 quartets. There's 6 of them, and Corelli's Opus 9. I think there's 12 of those, but that's a thing too. Kind of like beer, you know. Only it lasts longer, but well, there are a lot of parallels. And so we were just thinking, well, we've got 2 other shows like this we can do. Plus, I thought of some other music that would go great with poetry. So there's that to look forward to. And another thing I'm looking forward to personally is volume 2 of the Bach suites. I don't know if you had a chance to check out the CDs. There's a couple of Revel CDs over there. And then there's kind of a weird little 2-disc set by me, and it's the suites 1 through 3, the first half of the Bach suites, but each one is performed twice. One disc they're performed on a Baroque cello similar to this one, and on the other disc they're performed on a modern cello. And that tells the whole story to me of how I feel like the Bach suites were sort of revealed to me. It's genuinely embarrassing to admit, but when I was first assigned as a student to learn and play the Bach suites, they didn't appeal to me. They just didn't sound good to me. And part of the reason was that I was listening to recordings that were, as we talked about before, when the Bach suites came back into the repertoire, it was no longer the Baroque era. It was they came back into the repertoire during the Romantic era. And then, you know, time kept going. And I was born in the whatever era that was, the very recent era. For some reason, the pieces had taken on all of the baggage of the years that passed between when they were written and when they were discovered, and they were treated as romantic works. And Bach is simultaneously the supreme, unchallenged master of counterpoint and of harmony. To this day, if you go to a conservatory or music school and you take a harmony class, your textbook is the chorales of Bach. That's your textbook. It's not, you know, a committee from Juilliard put together. It's just the chorales written by Bach, 1 through 300 and I forget something. A lot of them. And your textbook, if you're a keyboard player, how to learn to play counterpoint, it's the 2 and 3 part inventions. It's the great contrapuntal works of Johann Sebastian Bach. And so it stands to reason that those skills would be present in his writing for any instrument. But of course, a cello or a violin, we don't have the ability to play multiple lines going in different directions. But Bach, if you find him on his turf, you realize that he is writing contrapuntally. And he is taking turns with different lines. Sometimes they overlap. Sometimes they're simultaneous. You hear more than one note at a time, but usually not. And actually, as he wrote the 6 suites, he got more and more crafty about how he did it each time he wrote a suite. And there's a huge evolution from 1 through 6. But that I began to understand that that's not visible in the writing on the staff. It's just note followed by note, followed by note, followed by note. And it was when I acquired one of these, a Baroque cello, that the music started to play itself. And I started to realize, oh wait, that note that follows that note is not in the same melodic line as that note. And I don't know if you can hear that at all, but I think it's something that Bach does brilliantly. So because I feel so indebted to my experience playing on the Baroque cello, and since the music came so much to life for me in ways it had, and I think one of the best analogies for that maybe would be when I was in 8th grade and we read Julius Caesar, and I was righteously bored by reading it. But then we went in a class to see a production of it, and it was spellbinding because it didn't just say, word followed by word. I can't actually quote it in Julius Caesar except a very short line, which is the last lines of the play, which won't be very informative. But it wasn't just robotic the way it was lying there in in 2 dimensions on the page. We have the same problem with music because in the time of Bach, it was not customary for the composer to instruct the performer as to how the performer would perform the work. Bach was quite a bit more directive than other. It is not customary to improvise very much when playing the music of Bach, but in the Baroque era it was, in general, customary for most composers when their work was being played for the performers to improvise on it. But nevertheless, Bach didn't even say play this part loudly and this part softly, or he didn't say how fast or slow to play things. A lot of these things were received knowledge, it was in the air, and a lot of it was just left to the performer. And so it was the cello that helped me discover some of these things, and once I had done that, I really didn't want to go back to playing it the other way. But I make most of my living playing on a modern cello, which has, in contrast to this, it has steel strings and a very, very different bow, and it has an end pin, and a few other differences about it. And the main difference between these 2 instruments is that where the Baroque cello is characteristically quite resonant, so you can play a note and it keeps going. If you remember the very beginning of the first suite, it starts with this pattern. That's called a pedal tone. Bach would have played that with his feet if he was playing on an organ. That's why it's called a pedal tone. But that doesn't work so well on a modern cello. Those cellos are made more to project and fill a large space with sound. But what I decided to do was to see how much of what I had learned about the Bach suites by playing on a Baroque cello could translate to a modern cello. And that's why I recorded it on Baroque and Modern. Because I would love to evangelize the idea that just because we're playing on an instrument that more reflects the tonal and timbral aesthetics of today doesn't mean we have to use the musical styles that were present when that instrument was developed. So that's a bit of a challenge, but it's something that I really love to try and spread out there. The next suite that I'm going to play is really in contrast with the first one. It's the second one. And whereas the first one is in G major, and Bach is really coming at it as a novice of writing for cello and using most of his keyboard chops to make that suite work. This one, clearly he's more experienced at writing for the cello and doesn't have quite the same motoric design. It's in D minor also, which means it's a very, very different feel. It has the same exact structure though. It's got a prelude and it's followed by 5 dances.
So, on a minor note, a D minor note, which is the saddest of all keys, a quote from Tom Waits: "The world is a hellish place, and bad writing is destroying the quality of our suffering." Now, from the front of the Ars Poetica book, which is the letting poets and academics and the proofs have it, listen to this wonderful quote from Lytton Strachey. "The whole thing seems to be extraordinarily weighty and interesting, but Lord, what a hopeless, confused jumble of inarticulate matter. It is a vast vegetable mass of inert ponderosity." That was his review of a writer. I was wow. You don't want Lytton Strachey on your bad side. So just a couple of lighthearted, fun Ezra poems. Another Santa Fe poem. This is called "The Spirit Within." A tiny SUV that dreams of being earth-friendly zooms up into my rearview mirror as I tried to pass an 18-wheeler on I-25. And my speedometer showed 8 or 9 over the limit set for the construction zone here on the southern edge of Santa Fe. But that didn't do it for the thick gray beard and little round glasses that trimmed the senescent hippie waving his skinny arms behind me. I pulled right as soon as I cleared the truck. He flew by on the left, and I barely had enough time to read his New Mexico plate. Namaste. Not our fault. "Oh my God, do you have to write about politics and religion so much?" she asks. "Why do poets always do that?" The girl from West Virginia has a way of saying poets like she's spitting out husks of wet sunflower seeds. I tell her, well, when the subject of love dries up, there's only 2 topics left. So here's a Bukowski specific poem from Ezra, "My Own Personal Yoda." When the days go edgewise and I can't see the next dime, even on my tiptoes, I scour Bukowski to get my bearings. I like how he chews on his cigar in the filthy glass of his second-floor slum window, then spits it all out as he tells me who's walking by and whether their miniskirts are blue or green or yellow. He makes sure I remember that everybody is dying the same American death, just at different income levels. Says he's got no time for high poetic bullshit, then throws down lines like this. like a Van Gogh bursting and breaking the trachea of the earth and the sun. Without even pausing the mad tap of his grungy fingers at the typer, his wine and pint-riddled rooms brimmed with mice, ghosts, and California-sized cockroaches. And I see bits and pieces of it all still in his teeth when he bears them to swig black coffee at the horse races. And I know it's time to quit my bitching and just get back to work.
I live in New Mexico, and there's the part of northern New Mexico, there's a dialect in English known as Burqueño, which etymologically descends from the word Albuquerque, Burqueño. And in that language, words don't mean always the same thing we're used to them meaning. They're the same words, they just don't mean the same thing. So one of my favorite bumper stickers that is not too common, but you see it often, just the right amount to make you laugh every time. And you ponder this while we have the next movement. It says, "Namaste, bitches."
So, a brief quote from Bukowski himself. "Those constipated minds that seek larger meaning will be dispatched with the other garbage. Back off. If there is light, it will find you." To go with that, John D. Graham's. Few rules for the starving artist that are really more just guidelines. 1, be certain you are an artist. Sure, you're starving. Maybe it's because you're lazy or untalented. It could be a lot of things, really. 2, please understand, words are under no obligation to you. Just because you expect them to accomplish this or that doesn't mean they will. Words don't give a single damn about you or what you want. Can you be okay with that? Think before answering. 3, being profoundly unhappy does not add depth or substance. It only worries your family and exasperates your friends. Angst is for amateurs. Sylvia Plath wrote in spite of her depression, not because of her depression. 4, are you even listening? These are unimportant. Quit staring out the window like that. It's creepy. 5, is writing well what you want with every atom of every molecule of every ounce of everything you are? Wow. Then I really hope it works out for you. 6, don't be clever. It's a college boy's crutch. 7, don't be deliberately obscure. Because there is a weather vane that spins a yarn in the feathered east. Listen, you are not Cormac McCarthy. You will need to use a semicolon or a question mark now and then. years before Bach came along. Galileo in 1642, the earth moves around the sun. Galileo's last words were said to have been, "Nevertheless, it moves." You took away our center, and displaced us, and moved us away from the command post of God's universe. Then you stuck some bright star, a burning ball with no soul, there in our place instead. How did you think the cardinals and bishops would react to that news? After they'd gone to all that trouble having their elaborate gowns tailored, not to mention the huge expense of those great and gaudy hats. Maybe at 69 you saw a certain allure in the conditions of house arrest. I'm in my late 40s, and I'll tell you, it's crossed my mind a time or two. Maybe you saw more in that telescope than you were prepared to tell us. Either way, the more I mull over your defiant last words, the more I want to say them out loud to everyone I meet. Nevertheless, it moves. Another tough Ezra poem. The title of this is Another Outlaw Manifesto. There are many, apparently. Another Outlaw Manifesto. When the wood is damp, a spark is sometimes not enough to get a fire going. So, we spend some days a bit colder than others. But when you are born for this lean life out here on the knife edge of art, you huddle close to other outlaws, find your hidden caves, and you stick this shit out together. A good stiff scotch doesn't hurt either. So what if the well-polished ass of ignorance is yanking the chains and reins of this worn-thin but decent country? That's no reason to leave it. Just stick to your paint and ink-loaded guns. Because thinkers, when they realize they'd stopped thinking for a while, start thinking again, and eventually outthink the non-thinkers who slipped through the wide cracks in the floorboards of hell. It's a tired old plot for books and the big stage. A league of buffoons and limp appendages and poodle fakers running a kakistocracy. And we have no time now for profound surprise or righteous indignation. We just need to get back to tending the fire. Dave's Foxhead Tavern in Iowa City is a favorite drinking hole for the very notorious Iowa Writers Workshop. It is there are varying opinions on the Iowa Writers Workshop when it comes to creative writing. And there is some bathroom graffiti in Dave's Foxhead Tavern in Iowa City in a pool hall in Iowa City that reads, "The afterlife will be the same, but without pool. Poets will be farther away, but still too close." So I want to read you now the poem from Bukowski that I mentioned at the very beginning. Bukowski, who had a reputation for being a pretty horrible human being and a long and rough life. And this is his poem called "The Bluebird." There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him and inhale cigarette smoke. And the whores and the bartenders and the grocery store clerks never know that he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Don't you want to mess me up? Do you want to mess me up? You want to screw up my works? You want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever. I only let him out at night sometimes when everybody is asleep. I say, I know you're there, so don't be sad. Then I put him back, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die. And we sleep together. Like that, with our secret pact. And it's nice enough to make a man weep. But I don't weep. Do you? One last poem before the last piece. Carla, thank you so much for this. This is so fun. You're incredible, and I love your vision, and I love the things that you dream up. Joel, let's take this on tour. let's go on tour. This is too much fun. And, so I'm going to close with a poem for readers and for bookstores. Thank you to Malvern Books. You guys are awesome. We love not only what you have and what you do here, but what you stand for.
Yes.
And we appreciate it very, very much. And so thank you to that. So here's a bookstore poem and a poem for readers from Ezra. Call to arms. Oh, readers of books, any books, even prose. O soldiers of the stanza and the well-laid line, comes the day, yes, now is the time, friends, to make yourself seen. Be a public nuisance. Read on buses, read on subways, read on pedicabs, on airplanes, in their crowded ports. Read on bicycles, read on skateboards, in cars, at lights. But remember, we need you alive. And the books must be real, the kind with pages and covers. No tablets or phones, they'll think you're playing World of Warcraft. And pack your literary heat at all times. It is your First Amendment right to bear this great weapon of the ages.
Woo. Yes.
It will terrorize Trump supporters. They will think that you know something they don't, which will be, in fact, a simple and inconvenient truth. So rise up, O eternal student of the world's critical stories, its vital biographies, and now more than ever, crucial histories. Ye readers of books, soldiers of the stanza, you are our last and only hope. Thank you all.
being here tonight, you know you have wristbands, which means you get 20% off at Malvern Books all summer long. So put that to good use because we want to support the artists. That's what Revel is about. So go forth and add these things to your collection. They brought me so much joy in mine. So, all right.